And so it was fascinating to watch him kind of take that role as a type of taskmaster. What's up, friends? My name's Kevin Visay, singer, songwriter, and producer. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the new Beatles documentary with Peter Jackson streaming on Disney Plus called Get Back. Before I continue, make sure to check out my latest music. I have a link in the description. Yeah, it's really good. The newest Christmas song is great, and the latest album is phenomenal. So I hope you'll check it out. Now let's talk a little bit about the Beatles documentary and the things I found fascinating. For purposes of discussion, I don't want to spoil anything for those watching the documentary for the first time. I'd just like to point out a few parts that I found interesting about this documentary. Number one, I didn't realize how much the death of Mr. Epstein changed the Beatles. It's so crazy, and you can tell in the documentary how much it affects them. Like at one point they start talking about Mr. Epstein, and you can tell A, they're sad, and B, that's completely changed their dynamic. Without Mr. Epstein to keep them disciplined, keep them guided, they've lost a lot of that leadership. And you can tell they also just had lost a friend. You know, they were all kind of mourning together. It'd only been like a year and a half since this guy had died, and he'd been such an integral part of their lives. And they still hadn't gotten over the fact that he was out of their lives. And that really changed as well kind of Paul McCartney's thought process, because he took over that kind of leadership role because there was a void and someone needed to fill it. And he was probably the most task-oriented, motivated of the Beatles. And so it was fascinating to watch him kind of take that role as a type of taskmaster and to see how much he kind of commanded the field as one of the Beatles in terms of just keeping them on task. So just seeing that dynamic was incredibly interesting for me. I loved how much they goofed around because it just felt like a normal band. Like that's what bands do. We hang out, we goof around, we write songs, and we play other people's songs when we come up with our new songs. That's just how it's done. If that's a surprise to anyone watching it, you've never been in a band before. Because that's like half of what it is. Half of what it is showing people other music and talking about other music and then writing a song, talking about your lives and writing a song. You know, that's just how it goes. The other thing I found interesting is how much Paul McCartney was an arranger in this situation. He was very much taking that producer role as kind of part of his thing, which makes sense because he was kind of the lead in getting their tracks to have more of that produced quality, more of the differentiated instrumentation on Sgt. Pepper's Magical Mystery Tour, etc. So it was cool to see him taking charge in that way and kind of pointing out things that people should do. I thought it was interesting because after watching parts of the Beatles documentary, I watched an interview with a cameraman there, and he said that Ringo never had to be directed. And I just thought, my goodness, you were not paying attention as a cameraman, because Paul McCartney is directing Ringo, he's directing George, he's directing John. He is directing, he is producing, he is arranging right there. And it's fascinating. I mean, everyone is contributing for sure, but you can tell that Paul McCartney has taken on that role as arranger, and it's so cool to see that, to see what a master arranger looks like as he's doing it, like in practice, what it looks like to be such a good arranger. And you know, they would discuss different ways to do the song and which parts make sense. And he was always, about other people's opinions too. It wasn't like it was just a Paul McCartney show. Obviously, it's the Beatles. They're all phenomenal. So it was cool to see that dynamic play out. Another fascinating moment for me was watching them come back with songs. So not all of the songs were kind of written right there, but rather they would kind of germinate all of these things in their mind, and they'd go home and they'd continue to write. Like their minds would unconsciously be writing, and sometimes that would take the form of them sitting down and writing out full melodies and verses or choruses or what have you. So, John Lennon would go home one night, he'd come back with Across the Universe. George Harrison would go home one night, he'd come back with I Me Mine. Which is crazy. It's just so interesting to watch, like those songs develop, but just how they first start getting their initial spark. There's this great scene where George Harrison explains how he came up with I Me Mine, about this random movie he was watching and about this particular scene that caught his attention because it had this kind of dancing vibe, it's kind of Viennese waltz. And so he developed I Me Mine based off of that. And that was just so fascinating to watch from a songwriter perspective of how this kind of random firing happened and his unconscious mind developed it and arranged it and played with the melodies to create this completely new song, which is just beautiful. I think I Me Mine is a special piece of music for sure. That's a great song. One of my absolute favorite moments of the whole documentary is when Paul McCartney sits down to write Get Back. It's so cool to see him just playing that bass riff. And I heard the bass riff and I was like, oh my goodness, this is how he comes up with Get Back. And then he just started going, and just he looked ridiculous, just humming these random tunes. And then you hear him say, get back, get back, get back to where you once belonged. And I was like, whoa. He'd gone from just kind of like making weird sounds to suddenly get back. Just playing a riff, feeling the pressure, and he just hits this chorus that is one of the catchiest choruses of all time. It was so fun to watch. I'd never thought of songwriting that way, and I feel like every time I watch something by Paul McCartney, I see a new way to write songs, because I feel like he's so open about the process, and I appreciate it so much. And I've never thought, I can just like make sounds and wait for something to come. So often I'm writing stuff and waiting for something to come, but I'm never just like playing a riff and then making sounds. And I want to start doing that a little more because of that. I thought it was a brilliant moment. And if you haven't watched the documentary, just watch it for that one moment if you're into songwriting, because it's so cool. Another great part is when the rest of the band is kind of out discussing the staging for their show. The director's going around to John Lennon, George Harrison, Ringo, and just talking about different places they can go, trying to convince them to go to this place in Africa where George Harrison does not want to go, and he's not having it. He's not pumped. You hear Paul in the background playing Let It Be on the piano, which is awesome. It's so cool to hear, just the development of those chords and just the ideas start to come as he's going through the music. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my goodness, they're just having this casual discussion while Paul McCartney's, next to them on the piano, dawdling around, coming up with one of the most brilliant piano vocal pieces ever written. That's the craziest thing, is how casual the making of legends is. It just breaks down these legendary songs and takes them back to kind of their core essence and shows you the process of it. And I think that's what makes this documentary really special. So I recommend anyone who's interested in songwriting or processes to check this out. Also, if you're interested in leadership or just interested in the Beatles, highly recommend it. Hope you've enjoyed this little video. Make sure to check out my latest music, my Christmas song, Celebration, and my latest album, Giovanni. Links can be found in the description. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button, comment, share. Let me know your guys' favorite parts about the documentary. Love to hear it. Love to, rewatch with a new perspective that you people can supply to me. And that's it. That's all I got. Catch you on the flip. Celebration, the late night Christmas cheer.